Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today we're taking a look at a really interesting book, I think.
Yeah.
It's called La historia fantástica de un descubrimiento, which translates to The Fantastic History of a Discovery by Daniel Ruzo.
So this book is it's a pretty unique look at ancient mysteries.
Definitely.
It's not just a dry, academic book.
Right.
It's like Ruzo's own personal journey, driven by his dreams and this insatiable curiosity.
Yeah, you really get the feeling that you're right there with him as he's exploring these ancient sites.
Yeah, he takes you along for the ride.
So, what are some of the big questions that Ruzo's work tries to answer?
Well, one of the biggest is the possibility of a civilization that existed before the Great Flood.
Whoa.
A civilization that was maybe even more advanced than us in terms of technology and knowledge.
Really?
Yeah. He uses the incredible skill and precision of ancient sculptures as evidence.
That's fascinating.
For example, many of them are carved from super hard rock.
Like, how could they have done that?
Right. It really makes you question what we thought we knew about the timeline of human history.
Okay, so we've got this potential pre-flood civilization.
Right.
But then it gets even more interesting when we look at the symbols in these sculptures.
Yeah, the symbolism is key.
Ruzo finds these recurring motifs like dogs and foxes and turtles and condors. And it seems like they're not just random animal figures.
Not at all.
Like there's some sort of system of meaning there.
Exactly. It's like he's uncovering a hidden language, maybe even a form of writing, or a way to encode knowledge. And what's really interesting is that these symbols appear on different continents, suggesting a connection between cultures that we thought were totally isolated.
So he's saying that these cultures, separated by vast oceans, were actually communicating with each other.
That's what he proposes, and it's definitely controversial.
I can imagine.
But he makes a compelling case when you look at the detail and the conviction he brings to the research.
So let's get back to these sculptures for a minute. What makes them so unique?
Well, one thing that Ruzo emphasizes is that these sculptures weren't just carved onto the surface of rocks. They were carved directly into the natural rock formations.
So they're like part of the landscape itself.
Exactly. And the scale and complexity of some of these carvings is just mind-blowing.
They must have taken so much time and effort to create.
They clearly held a deep significance for the people who made them.
But what was that significance?
Well, that's where Ruzo's interpretations come in.
Okay.
He digs into ancient myths and esoteric traditions, and even his own intuition to try and decode the meaning behind these sculptures.
So it gets a little speculative.
It does.
He even starts talking about things like telluric energies and gateways to other realms of consciousness.
It goes there.
Okay, hold on. Telluric energies. Gateways to other realms.
Yeah, it gets pretty wild.
Can you break that down a bit?
Sure. So Ruzo believed that these sculptures weren't just passive works of art. They were active participants in this dynamic exchange of energy and information.
Like they had a function.
Exactly. Maybe even a practical purpose, like harnessing those telluric energies.
I think we need to back up for a second.
Right.
For those of us who don't know what telluric energies are, can you explain?
It's like the Earth's own energy field.
Okay.
Almost like its life force. And a lot of ancient cultures believed that certain places, like where these sculptures are found, had a higher concentration of this energy.
So he's saying that these cultures had a way of working with this earth energy that we've lost.
That's a big part of his theory, and it's pretty radical.
I can see that.
But he doesn't just throw these ideas out there.
Right.
He connects them to ancient myths, the symbolism and the actual placement of the sculptures.
He even goes as far as suggesting that the layout of these sites might hold a secret plan.
A blueprint for something much bigger than we can understand right now.
This is sounding like an Indiana Jones movie.
I know, right?
But before we get too carried away, I want to go back to Ruzo's personal journey.
Okay.
You mentioned that he was guided by dreams. In a sense of destiny. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so one of the most important experiences that he talks about in the book is this vivid dream he had while he was staying at a house that was supposedly haunted.
Haunted.
By indigenous spirits they called Nakaj.
Interesting.
And in this dream, he encountered this mysterious figure who was associated with a place called Masma.
Masma? What is that?
Yeah, it's a strange name, right?
Yeah.
Well, he became obsessed with this dream and the name Masma.
So what did he do?
He started researching, and he found out that Masma had two meanings in the Quechua language.
What were they?
One was house with a large wing, and the other was large jar or jug.
Those seem pretty different.
They do, but he realized that they could both refer to the same thing.
What's that?
An ancient Peruvian burial chamber or sanctuary called a pacarina.
A pacarina.
Yeah, they were often carved into isolated rocks or hills, so they kind of looked like a house.
And they were hollow, like a jar.
Exactly. It was like a light bulb moment for him.
Wow.
Connecting his dream to the real world and to these ancient structures he was so fascinated by.
So he thought that Masma, from his dream, was an actual place in Peru.
That's right. He believed his dream was leading him to a real place, a place of ancient power and knowledge.
And his research didn't stop there, did it?
No, he kept digging.
What else did he find?
He found mentions of Masma as the name of a village or some ruins near Jauja.
Where's that?
It's a city in the Peruvian Andes.
Okay.
And get this, he also found out that Masma was the name of the fifth son of Ishmael in the book of Genesis.
Whoa, now there's a biblical connection too.
It all starts to come together.
So how did Russo tie all of this together?
Well, he saw it as more evidence for his theory that there was this connection between ancient cultures across vast distances and time.
Okay.
He became really interested in the Masmuda people.
Who are they?
They were a Moorish tribe from ancient Mauritania.
In North Africa.
And he thought they might have been descendants of this biblical Masma.
So he's suggesting that this Moorish tribe somehow made it to Peru.
That's what he's proposing.
Oh.
It's definitely a bold claim.
Yeah.
And he admits that the evidence is mostly circumstantial.
Like what?
Linguistic similarities, shared symbols, and the possibility of pre-flood seafaring.
Okay, so we're talking about some pretty big leaps here.
We are.
But he presents it all with so much detail.
He does.
It's hard not to be drawn in.
Yeah, you start to think maybe he's onto something.
This is all incredibly fascinating.
It is.
But my head's starting to spin a little.
I hear you.
Maybe we can focus on one specific example of Ruzo's research.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier that he found some ancient sculptures near Lima where he lived.
That's right.
Can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, so the place where his journey really began was Cerro San Cristobal.
What's that?
It's a hill overlooking Lima, and that's where he discovered his first proto-historical sculptures.
Hold on. Proto-historical sculptures.
It's a mouthful, I
know.
What does that even mean?
So proto-historical basically means that these sculptures were created before recorded history.
So before any written records.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Ruzo believed that they predated the known civilizations of Peru.
Possibly, even going back to that pre-flood era we were talking about.
It's a possibility.
But what made him so sure about their age?
Well, one thing was their unique style and technique. Unlike later Peruvian cultures who often carved onto the surface of rocks,
Right.
these sculptures were carved directly into the natural rock formations.
Like we were saying earlier.
Yeah, almost like they were an extension of the landscape itself.
That's incredible.
And the artistry and precision of the carvings really stood out.
Suggesting a level of skill that we don't usually associate with those time periods.
Exactly.
So what do these sculptures actually depict?
All sorts of things.
Yeah.
Human faces, animals, geometric patterns.
But one of the most striking discoveries was a group of rocks
Okay.
that when you looked at them from a certain angle, formed the shape of a human skull.
A skull. That's a little creepy.
I know, right?
But also pretty cool.
Definitely.
What did Ruzo think about this skull?
He saw it as a symbol of death and rebirth, which is a common theme in a lot of ancient cultures.
Right.
He also noticed that there were 3 dog heads sculpted into the hill.
Dog heads.
Yeah. And he connected those to ancient myths.
About what?
About canine guardians of the underworld.
Okay, now we're getting into some serious myth and legend territory.
We are just scratching the surface.
This is incredible.
I know, right?
There's so much more to Ruzo's journey, and we're just getting started.
Definitely.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm still thinking about those sculptures on Cerro San Cristobal.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that such ancient art was right there in Lima the whole time.
Hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. And that's just the beginning of Ruzo's journey.
Okay, so where are we headed next?
Today we're going high up into the Andes Mountains.
Oh, wow.
To explore the Marcahuasi Plateau.
Marcahuasi, what's that?
It's this high-altitude plateau over 4,000 meters above sea level.
That's high.
Known for its dramatic landscapes and these really unusual rock formations.
Sounds incredible.
And it's also shrouded in ancient myths and legends.
Okay, so was Ruzo led there by another one of his dreams?
Not exactly. His exploration of Marcahuasi was based on years of research.
What kind of research?
He had been studying ancient maps and texts looking for clues about the location of these proto-historical sculptures.
So he's just like following a treasure map.
Kind of.
Mhm.
And all his research pointed to Marcahuasi.
As a place where he might find more of these sculptures.
He believed that Marcahuasi held the key to even greater mysteries.
Okay, I have to know, did it live up to the hype?
Marcahuasi exceeded even Ruzo's expectations.
Wow.
He spent 9 years documenting the plateau,
9 years.
photographing and analyzing hundreds of sculptures.
That's dedication.
He called Marcahuasi an open book of proto-history.
So what did he find there? What were some of the most remarkable sculptures?
Well, one of the most iconic is the Monument to Humanity.
The Monument to Humanity.
It's this massive rock formation that when you view it from different angles, reveals all these human faces representing different racial types.
Wait, so he's saying that this one rock was sculpted to show people from all over the world?
That's what it looks like.
How is that even possible?
It's a mystery. The skill required to create something like that is just mind-boggling.
It really makes you wonder what else these ancient cultures were capable of.
I know, it's humbling.
So besides the human forms, were there any other interesting figures at Marcahuasi?
Oh yeah, there's a whole menagerie of animals.
Like what?
Condors, foxes, turtles, even an elephant.
An elephant? But elephants aren't native to South America.
I know, right? It's a puzzle.
What did Ruzo think about that?
Well, he speculated that it might be a memory from a time when elephants did roam South America.
Like when the continents were connected?
Maybe. Or it could be a symbolic representation based on ancient myths or stories.
So again, we see this theme of global interconnectedness.
Exactly. And it's not just the figures themselves, it's also their placement and orientation.
Like he thought they were positioned in a specific way for a reason.
He believed they were intentionally arranged to create this complex system of alignments.
Like what kind of alignments?
He suggested it might be a celestial calendar or a map of sacred sites.
That's incredible. But why go to all that trouble? What was the purpose?
Ruzo believed these sculptures were more than just art or decoration.
Okay.
He saw them as expressions of a deep understanding of natural forces.
Like the telluric energies we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. He thought these sculptures might have been a way to harness and channel those energies.
For what?
Maybe for healing spiritual transformation, accessing hidden knowledge.
So the sculptures weren't just passive. They were active participants in this flow of energy.
That's a pretty mind-blowing concept.
It is. But did Ruzo find any evidence beyond the sculptures themselves to support these theories?
That's a good question, and it's one of the reasons why his work is still controversial. He mainly focused on the sculptures, their style, their symbolism, and their placement as evidence.
So he didn't do a lot of digging or find other artifacts?
Not really. His work is mostly based on interpretation.
On his way of seeing and understanding these sculptures?
Yeah, it's like he was deciphering a lost language, using intuition and insight as his guide.
That's fascinating.
Ruzo was a visionary.
Okay, so we've talked about the monument to humanity and the animal figures.
Right.
What else did Ruzo uncover at Marcahuasi?
One of the most puzzling discoveries was the existence of what he called false walls.
False walls. What are those?
They were rock formations that at first glance looked like constructed walls,
Okay.
but they were actually carved from the natural bedrock.
So they were intentionally made to look like walls.
It seems that way.
But why? What was the purpose?
Ruzo believed these false walls had a symbolic function, representing a veil or barrier between the material and spiritual realms.
Interesting.
He thought they might have been part of initiation rituals or ceremonies.
To test people's perception.
Maybe to make them question the nature of reality itself?
That's pretty deep.
It is.
These sculptures really do seem like gateways to another way of thinking.
They force us to confront the limitations of our own modern worldview.
Which often focuses on the material world and ignores the intangible.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say we entertain the possibility of these lost civilizations with their advanced knowledge. What happened to them? Why did their knowledge disappear?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, and is there anything we can learn from their fate?
Ruzo, drawing on ancient myths and his interpretation of the symbolism at Marcahuasi, believed that these civilizations might have been wiped out by some kind of catastrophic event.
Like what?
Floods, earthquakes, maybe even a cosmic impact.
That's a scary thought.
It is a reminder that even the most advanced civilizations are vulnerable to the forces of nature.
And that we should be careful not to repeat their mistakes.
Right.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
No, there's also inspiration to be found in Ruzo's work.
How so?
He encourages us to learn from the past, to appreciate the ingenuity of these ancient cultures.
And maybe even rediscover some of the knowledge that's been lost.
Exactly.
This is a journey of discovery, not just of ancient sites and sculptures, but of our own potential as humans.
And our place in the grand scheme of things.
But we're not done yet, are we?
No, there's still more to explore.
In Ruzo's work.
Yes.
All right, so we're back and ready to dive even deeper into Ruzo's theories.
Yeah, let's unpack some of those symbols and patterns he found at Marcahuasi.
You mentioned that he believed they weren't just random decorations.
Right.
Like they held a deeper meaning, maybe even a secret code.
Exactly. He saw them as a language waiting to be deciphered.
So what were some of the key symbols he found, and how did he interpret them?
Well, one that really stands out is the Chaldean cross.
The Chaldean cross. I feel like I've heard of that before.
It's a four-pointed star, often found inside a circle.
Right. I think I've seen that symbol in some ancient art.
It pops up all over the place, actually. In ancient Mesopotamia, it represented the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
Oh, right. Okay.
But Ruzo saw an even deeper meaning in its presence at Marcahuasi.
What was that?
He believed it represented the interconnectedness of all things, like a cosmic harmony underlying the material world.
So it's not just about the elements themselves,
No.
but about their relationship to each other.
Exactly. And their balance within this larger cosmic order.
That's a pretty advanced concept for a culture that we consider to be primitive.
That's Ruzo's point. He's not just looking at these symbols superficially. He's trying to understand the system of knowledge that they represent.
Okay, so the Chaldean cross represents the elements in this cosmic harmony.
Right.
What other symbols were important?
Well, another common one was the spiral.
The spiral.
Yeah, that shape that appears in countless cultures throughout history.
Like a snail shell or a galaxy.
Exactly. Ruzo saw it as a symbol of the cyclical nature of time, the continuous flow of energy and creation.
That makes sense.
He also found a lot of geometric patterns, triangles, squares, things like that.
What did he make of those?
He connected them to ancient mathematical principles and the concept of sacred geometry.
Sacred geometry. Remind me what that is again?
It's the idea that certain geometric shapes and proportions hold a special spiritual significance.
Okay.
That they reflect the underlying order and harmony of the universe.
So like the golden ratio.
That's one example. These shapes and proportions appear everywhere in nature, from crystals to plants to the movements of the planets.
So Ruzo is saying that these ancient sculptors were using sacred geometry in their work.
He believed they understood the power of these shapes and proportions to resonate with the human mind.
And with the subtle forces of nature.
Right. It's another example of their advanced knowledge and their ability to work with energies that we're only starting to understand.
This is all fascinating, but how much of this is Ruzo's interpretation and how much is supported by other evidence?
That's a valid question. Some critics say that Ruzo relies too heavily on his own personal insights and his knowledge of esoteric traditions.
That's not all based on hard scientific evidence.
Not necessarily, but that's also what makes his work so unique.
He's not afraid to think outside the box.
Exactly. He's encouraging us to use our imaginations and to look beyond conventional explanations.
Speaking of unconventional ideas, you mentioned something about Ruzo finding clues about hidden underground structures at Marcahuasi.
Oh, yeah. That's one of the most intriguing aspects of his research.
Tell me more about that.
So while he was exploring the plateau, he started noticing things that suggested there might be a whole network of tunnels and chambers underneath.
Really? Like what kind of things?
Well, he found these alignments between certain rock formations that seemed too precise to be natural. There were also these unexplained depressions in the ground.
Okay.
And he even heard local legends about secret entrances to an underground world.
Wow. A secret underground world. That sounds incredible.
I know, right?
So what did he think the purpose of these underground structures might be?
He had a few ideas. He thought they could have been shelters from some kind of cataclysmic event.
Like the flood, maybe?
Possibly. Or they could have been repositories for ancient knowledge, or even gateways to other dimensions or realms of consciousness.
Ooh, that's pretty far out there.
It is, but it's fascinating to consider.
Did Ruzo ever try to find these tunnels or these secret entrances?
He wanted to, but he faced a lot of obstacles.
Like what?
Limited resources and pushback from the Peruvian authorities.
So he was never able to fully explore them.
Unfortunately not. But he did document everything he found, the alignments, the legends, everything.
So maybe someday someone else will pick up where he left off.
I hope so.
Well, this has been an incredible journey.
It has.
Exploring Daniel Ruso's world of ancient mysteries.
He was a true visionary.
He really challenges us to rethink what we know about the past and our place in the world.
And to never stop questioning and exploring.
Exactly. There's still so much out there that we don't know.
And who knows what other incredible discoveries are waiting to be made.
To all our listeners out there, we encourage you to keep an open mind and to never stop searching for answers.
The world is full of mysteries, and it's up to us to unravel them.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.